A young billionaire sees two poor twin girls selling a teddy bear on the sidewalk. He asks, "Why are you selling this?" And one of them answers, "It's to buy food. We haven't eaten since yesterday." But what he does next, no one was prepared to see. A grey cloud covered the sky as Miles Carter exited his company's building. Autumn brought a chilly wind that scattered dried leaves across the ground. Miles adjusted his tie, checked his watch, and quickened his pace. He had an important meeting in 40 minutes on the other side of town. Miles Carter was a successful man, impeccable suit, distant gaze, and a constant silence that followed him. At the company, his employees called him Carter the Wall, not because he was rude or impolite, but because of his ability to show no emotion. He made tough decisions without blinking. He fired and hired with the same serious expression. He only smiled when absolutely necessary. At client dinners or when signing lucrative contracts, the city noise didn't bother him. In fact, it was like a soundtrack that perfectly matched his racing thoughts. Horns, conversations, hurried footsteps, all of it was just background music for his mental calculations. As he walked, he weighed the pros and cons of acquiring a small tech company. Would it be a good deal? The numbers said yes, but something nagged at him. Perhaps it was the owner's background, a young, arrogant man who had already gone bankrupt twice. Miles checked his watch again. 35 minutes. If he took a shortcut via Monroe Street, he could make it in 20. He turned left onto a less crowded road. The city noise lessened somewhat, and he adjusted his stride, carefully avoiding puddles from the previous night's rain. He was walking briskly, his thoughts locked on figures and decisions, when something made him stop. Two girls sitting on the sidewalk, holding an old teddy bear in their arms. The scene took him by surprise. It wasn't unusual to see children asking for money, but something about this was different. The girls weren't holding out their hands or asking for spare change. They were just sitting there, side by side, with a piece of cardboard next to them that read "Teddy Bear, $5. They spoke quietly to each other, straightening the teddy's faded red bow as if preparing a friend for an important party. Miles slowed his steps. He stopped, looked around for any adult who might be with them. There was nobody. The street was oddly empty for that time of day. The sun tried to break through the clouds, forming a diffused glow that partially lit the girls' faces. They looked alike. The older one might have been a few years ahead, with dark hair tied into two messy braids. The younger had the same hair, but loose, falling over watchful eyes. Both wore simple clothes, clean but visibly worn. A small birthmark on the older girl's chin suggested they were sisters. Miles almost continued on. Almost. But something in their gaze, a mix of hope and resignation, stopped him. He checked his watch. 32 minutes. He straightened his posture, cleared his throat, and approached them. The girls looked up at the same time. The older girl hugged the teddy bear tighter, while the younger offered a hesitant smile. "Why are you selling that?" he asked, curious. His tone came out softer than he intended. It wasn't the tone he used in negotiations, nor the one he used with his subordinates. It was a tone he'd nearly forgotten, one he hadn't used in a very long time. One of them, the younger, answered without hesitation, "It's to buy food. We haven't eaten since yesterday." There was no drama in her voice. She didn't seem to be exaggerating to get money. It was a simple, direct statement, the way someone might comment on the weather or the color of a flower. That made the words hit even harder. Miles was silent for a few seconds. He felt a tightness in his chest he didn't recognize, or rather, he hadn't felt in so long that he'd almost forgotten it existed. It was like something inside him had awakened from a long sleep. His mental clock was still ticking. 30 minutes until the meeting. The acquisition, the numbers, next quarter's projections, all of it suddenly felt very distant, like it belonged to someone else, another world. He crouched down and spoke gently. "You can keep the teddy bear, but now come with me to get something to eat." The girls looked at each other, engaging in that silent conversation only sisters can have. The older one frowned, wary. The younger tilted her head slightly to the right, then nodded, a secret code that Miles couldn't decode, but that clearly reached a conclusion. "All right," said the older girl, finally. "But Henry comes with us?" "Henry?" The teddy bear, explained the younger one, adjusting the red bow around the toy's neck. He's our friend. Sure, Miles replied, feeling a corner of his mouth lift in an involuntary smile. Henry needs to eat too. The girls laughed, a crystalline sound that felt out of place on that grey street. Miles stood up, straightened his jacket, and offered them his hands. The children hesitated for an instant, then smiled. They walked off hand in hand with him. The mental clock continued, 28 minutes to the meeting. With his free hand, Miles pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to his secretary. Meeting postponed. Personal emergency. It was unlike him. He had never postponed a meeting for personal reasons. But for the first time in years, Miles felt something was more important than numbers. There was a small bakery on the corner. It wasn't the kind of place Miles usually frequented. Normally, his meals were at expensive restaurants, business dinners in sophisticated settings. But this bakery gave off an inviting smell of fresh bread and coffee. The girls led him there, as if they knew the route by heart. Tiny, hurried steps, while Henry the teddy bounced along with their movement. Miles felt oddly out of place, matching their pace rather than imposing his own. The bell above the door jingled as they entered. The place was cozy, with simple wooden tables and a long counter displaying various breads and pastries. A grey-haired woman behind the counter smiled when she saw them. "Hello, girls. It's been a while since I've seen you here," she said, in an accent Miles couldn't quite place. "Hi, Ms. Rosa," replied the older girl shyly. "This is Mr." She paused, realizing she didn't know his name. "Miles," he completed. "Miles Carter." "He's going to buy food for us," the younger one explained, swinging the teddy bear. "And for Henry, too." Miss Rosa looked at Miles with an expression that mixed curiosity and gratitude. He felt his face grow warm, not exactly sure why. "These girls are special customers," Miss Rosa said, leaning over the counter. "What will you have today?" In the bakery, the girls savored grilled bread and orange juice. Nora, the younger one, grimaced at the juice, while June, the older, stacked bits of bread into little towers, then knocked them down with her finger, laughing. Miles just watched. Every gesture, every laugh, their small hands holding the cups carefully, as if they were delicate treasures. The way they looked at each other, that silent communication only sisters seemed to share. The way they included Henry in the meal, offering him crumbs of bread and whispering stories in his ear. He felt something new inside him, a sense of lightness, as if a part of him, long dormant, was finally awakening. It was strange, uncomfortable even, but in a way he didn't want it to end. "How old are you?" he asked, trying to start a conversation. "I'm older," June replied, lifting her chin proudly. "I was born first." "Only 2 minutes first," Nora protested, rolling her eyes. "Mom said I almost beat you, but you pushed me." Miles smiled. "So you're twins?" They both nodded in sync. "But I'm taller," declared June. "And I'm smarter," Nora shot back. Miles laughed, a genuine laugh that felt rusty from lack of use. "Where is your mom?" he asked. The girl's smiles faded slightly. "Working," June replied solemnly. "She cleans houses. Today she went far away and won't be back till night." "She told us to stay home," Nora explained, glancing at the teddy bear. "But we were hungry and there wasn't anything left to eat. So we thought of selling Henry," June said, hugging the teddy. "But we really didn't want to." Miles felt that tightness in his chest again. He thought about his own childhood, never going without food, never having to sell a toy to stave off hunger. The world's injustice hit him like a slap. "Henry's a very special teddy bear," he said, trying to sound casual. "Have you had him for a long time?" "Our dad gave him to us," Nora explained, adjusting the red bow. "Before he left." "He used to look nice," June added. "Now he's old, but we still love him." Miles looked at the teddy, the faded, patched fabric, one button eye slightly askew, giving it a curious expression, a simple toy that carried a world of meaning. June said she liked drawing pictures with sticks in the dirt. She showed her small hands, dirt under her nails, describing the sketches she made. Houses, trees, birds, happy people. Nora said the teddy was named Henry because they'd seen a brave king named Henry in a school book, a king who protected his people. "Henry looks after us when Mom isn't here," she explained, with a seriousness that didn't match her age. "He's small, Mimasi, but he's strong." Right there, among breadcrumbs and small confessions, Miles realized those girls had something he had lost: simple joy, the ability to find magic in small things, to turn a stick into a painting tool, an old teddy bear into a valiant guardian. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably his secretary, asking about the postponed meeting. For the first time in years, Miles ignored it. There was something more important happening here, in this simple bakery, with these children and their teddy bear. "Do you live near here?" he asked, ordering another juice for Nora despite her funny faces. "Not very," June answered. "We have to walk a bit, then cross the bridge, then walk some more." "We know the way," Nora assured him. "Mom taught us." Miles nodded, thoughtful. Part of him, the rational part that governed his life, said he'd done enough. He'd fed the kids, done a good deed for the day. He could move on, get back to his schedule, return to his world of numbers and decisions. But another part, dormant for so long, whispered that this was just the beginning, that these girls had opened a door inside him, and now it was impossible to close it again. "Well, I guess it's time you head back home," Miles said, checking his watch. "Your mum will worry if she doesn't find you there." The girls nodded, wiped their mouths with napkins, and got Henry settled in their arms. "Thank you for the food, mister," Nora said, offering a shy smile. "Yeah, thanks a lot," June added. "We can wait till Mom gets home now." As Miles watched the two small figures walking away on the sidewalk, hand in hand, Henry the teddy bobbing between them, he felt something strange happen inside him, an emptiness, and at the same time, an inexplicable certainty that this would not be his last encounter with the girls. He turned back to his postponed meeting, to numbers and contracts, but part of him stayed right there, in the bakery, among breadcrumbs and genuine laughter. Miles couldn't sleep well that night. The image of the two girls on the sidewalk, clinging to the old teddy bear, wouldn't leave his mind. He tossed and turned in his spacious, empty apartment, staring at the ceiling. The meeting he'd rescheduled had gone well, but he had been distant the entire time. His business partners even commented that he seemed different, less focused. Miles just offered a polite smile and said he was tired, but it wasn't fatigue. It was something deeper, as if the girls had touched a part of his heart that had been closed off for years. Morning arrived with a clear blue sky, no clouds. Miles got up before his alarm went off. He looked at his day's schedule: 3 meetings, a video conference with foreign investors, lunch with an important client, nothing that couldn't be postponed or delegated. For the first time in years, Miles called his secretary and asked her to cancel all his morning commitments. "Is there a problem, Mr. Carter?" she asked, trying to hide her shock. Miles never missed work. "No, I just need to take care of something personal," he replied, offering no further explanation. He dressed differently, no suit and tie. He chose jeans he rarely wore, a simple shirt and comfortable shoes. He looked at himself in the mirror and hardly recognized his own face. He seemed younger, less severe. He grabbed his wallet, hesitated, and took out some bills. Then, thinking better of it, he opened a drawer and took something he'd stored there for a long time, a small first aid kit. He didn't know why, but he put it in his pocket. On the way, he stopped at the same bakery as the day before. Miss Rosa recognized him and smiled. "Good morning. You're back?" she said, with that peculiar accent. "Yes, I'd like to buy some bread, to go," Miles replied, feeling strangely awkward. It had been ages since he'd bought something as simple as bread himself. "The girls liked you a lot, Ms. Rosa commented as she wrapped the fresh bread in a paper bag. "I haven't seen them smile like that in a long time." Miles nodded, at a loss for words. There were so many questions he wanted to ask about the girls, about their mother, about how they lived, but he felt it might be too intrusive. "Do they come here often?" he asked finally, trying to sound casual. "When they can," Miss Rosa replied, handing him the package. "Life isn't easy for them, you know. Their mom works hard, but, well, you understand." Miles understood. He paid for the bread, leaving more money than necessary, and left the bakery with a weight on his chest. He knew the world was unequal, of course. He saw it every day, but always from a distance, as an abstract concept that didn't concern him. Now, suddenly, it had faces. 3 faces, in fact. He walked to the same spot on the sidewalk where he'd met the girls the day before. He wasn't sure if they'd be there again. In truth, he wasn't even sure why he was there. What would he say to them? What could he offer besides another meal? He felt foolish, thinking about heading back to the office, back to the world he knew and where he felt safe. But then he saw it. There they were. The next day, Miles returned to that sidewalk. He found the girls playing with bottle caps and bits of string, pulling the teddy bear as if it were a little cart. They were so absorbed in their game, laughing as they lined up the colorful caps like tiny people waiting for the teddy to pass by. It was a simple scene, yet so filled with a joy Miles had forgotten existed in the world. "Look, June, Henry is giving these caps a ride," said Nora, adjusting the string that served as a leash for the teddy. "But they have to pay for the ride," June replied seriously, placing small stones on top of the caps. 2 stones each. Miles just stood there, watching. There was something magical about children's ability to turn simple objects into entire worlds of make-believe. He vaguely remembered playing in his own backyard as a child. Had he ever been that happy? He couldn't recall. June spotted him first. Her dark eyes widened in recognition and surprise. "Mister from the warm bread," she shouted, dropping the caps and pointing at Miles. Nora turned quickly, letting go of the string. Teddy, Henry toppled sideways, the caps scattered, but nobody seemed to care. The 2 girls were already running toward Miles with smiles that lit up their faces. They ran and hugged his legs, catching him off guard. Miles felt something strange in his chest, like his heart gave a sudden leap. It was a simple, innocent hug, but filled with an affection he hadn't experienced in a very long time. The girls looked at him as if he were a hero arriving for a new adventure. "You came back?" Nora exclaimed, jumping excitedly. "We said you would come back, didn't we, June?" "I knew it," said June, trying to sound more mature but unable to hide her smile. "I told Nora you'd come back, but she didn't believe me." "I did believe you," Nora protested, pouting. Miles crouched down so he could be at their level. It was strange how his body seemed to know what to do, even when his mind was confused. He smiled at them, a smile from some deep place within him. "I brought bread," he said, showing them the bakery package. "I thought you might be hungry again." The girl's eyes lit up even more. "Ms. Rosa's bread is the best in the world," Nora exclaimed, already trying to peek inside the bag. "Thanks, mister," said June, with a seriousness that didn't match her age. "We're a little hungry, actually." Miles opened the package and offered them bread. Each girl took one, taking hearty bites. Crumbs fell on their clothes, but they didn't seem to mind. Miles realized he was smiling again. "My name is Miles," he said, noticing they were still calling him Mister. "Miles Carter." "Miles," Nora repeated, her mouth full, trying to pronounce it properly. "It's a pretty name." "It's different," June commented, more at ease now. "I've never met anyone with that name." "And you're June and Nora, right?" Miles asked, recalling what he'd heard in the bakery. The girls nodded, surprised that he knew their names. "How do you know?" June asked, suspicious. "I heard you talking yesterday," Miles explained, sitting down on the sidewalk next to them, unbothered by his jeans getting dirty. "You were at the bakery, remember? You said your names." "Oh," June seemed to accept that explanation. "We were talking about you afterward. To Henry, too." "Really?" Miles glanced at the teddy bear lying on the ground a few steps away. "What did you say?" "That you're nice," Nora replied immediately, "and that your hair looks like a prince's." Miles laughed, running a hand through his dark, neatly combed hair. He'd never thought of it as prince hair. "Henry thinks you're nice, too," June added, standing to retrieve the teddy. He felt it. "He can sense people," Nora explained, revealing a big secret. "He doesn't like everyone, you know." Miles smiled again and took the teddy from June's outstretched arms. It was even more worn than he'd realized the day before. One button eye hung by a thread, some stuffing poked out where the fabric was torn. Yet there was something special about it. a kind of dignity that only well-loved toys possess. "Hello, Henry," Miles said, feeling a bit silly talking to a toy, yet strangely comfortable doing it. "Nice to officially meet you." The girls giggled, delighted to see an adult treating their imaginary friend seriously. "What's that?" June asked, pointing at the small first aid kit that had fallen out of Miles's pocket when he crouched down. "Oh, this..." Miles picked up the kit and opened it to show the girls. "They're things to take care of cuts. Bandages, ointments, that kind of stuff. Like a doctor." Nora's eyes grew wide with admiration. "Sort of," Miles chuckled, "but a lot simpler." That's when he noticed a small cut on June's hand, probably from playing with bottle caps. "You got hurt," he said, pointing to her hand. June quickly hid her hand behind her back, as if she'd done something wrong. "It's nothing," she muttered. "It'll heal." "Can I take a look?" Miles asked gently. "I promise it won't hurt." Hesitantly, June extended her hand. The cut wasn't deep, but it needed cleaning. Carefully, Miles took an antiseptic wipe from the kit and cleaned the wound. June bit her lip but didn't complain. You're brave," Miles praised, placing a colorful bandage over the cut. "There, it'll be fine in a few days." June looked at the bandage with a shy smile. "Thank you," she said, then turned to Nora. "Look, it's got a unicorn on it." Miles spent a bit more time playing with them, helping to organize the bottle caps into different patterns, learning the ever-changing rules of their invented game. He laughed like he hadn't in years, light-hearted, genuine laughter. It was strange how comfortable he felt there, sitting on the sidewalk with two children he barely knew. Then they said, "Do you want to see our house?" The question caught him off guard. Miles looked at the girls, their faces hopeful and trusting. He felt a pang of concern. What if their mother didn't approve? What if she thought he was some weirdo with bad intentions? "Is your mom home?" he asked cautiously. "Yes," Nora answered excitedly. "Today she's working at home, washing clothes." "She won't mind," Miles insisted. "I mean, me visiting unannounced." "Mom's nice," June assured him. "And we'll tell her you bought us food and bandages." Miles hesitated. Part of him said this might be complicated, that he should just say goodbye and return to his orderly, predictable world. But another part, growing stronger, was curious to know more about these girls' lives, to see how they lived. Who was the mother raising two such sweet and resilient children? "All right," he finally agreed. "I'd like to see your house." The girls cheered, clapping their hands and jumping. They quickly gathered the bottle caps and strings, putting everything into a worn cloth bag. Henry the teddy was entrusted to Miles's care, which he held with the respect due to such an important member of the family. The girls led him through alleys and back streets, talking non-stop the entire way. They told stories about the places they passed, the wall where June had once seen a huge orange cat, the tree where Nora found a blue feather, Ms. Rosa's bakery where they sometimes got day-old bread. The world through their eyes was filled with small wonders and adventures, so different from Miles's practical, calculative view. "The lady in that shop over there lets us look at books," Nora said, pointing to a tiny corner bookstore. "There's one with dragons that's so cool." "And there's a fountain in front," June added. "In summer, when it's hot, we dip our feet in." Miles listened, absorbing every detail. It was like rediscovering the city where he'd lived for years, seeing it for the first time through the girls' eyes. The path grew narrower, the houses simpler. They entered an area Miles only knew by name, a run-down neighborhood that rarely appeared in the news unless there was trouble. The sidewalks were cracked in many places, the pavement riddled with potholes. Even so, life was everywhere, people chatting by their doors, music blaring from open windows, children playing in small open spaces between buildings. "We live here," June announced, stopping in front of an old three-story building with peeling paint and visible cracks in the walls. All the way in the back, Miles followed them down a narrow corridor leading to the rear of the building. The place was dark, with poor ventilation, yet it was surprisingly clean given the conditions. They arrived at a small interior courtyard, where colorful clothes hung from improvised lines stretched between windows. "Mom's over there." Nora pointed to a small room at the courtyard's far end. The little room looked like a simple addition, probably built after the main structure. It had just one small window and a worn wooden door painted a faded blue. Miles felt his heart race. Suddenly, he was nervous, like a teenager meeting his girlfriend's parents for the first time. The girls ran ahead, opening the door without knocking. "Mum, we brought someone," Nora shouted. They led him into a tiny room at the back of an old building. The space was cramped but tidied with evident care. A double bed occupied one corner, neatly made with a colorful patched quilt. In another corner sat a small two-burner stove and an improvised sink. A curtain separated what Miles assumed was the bathroom. In the center stood a small table with 3 mismatched chairs. On the walls hung pencil drawings, likely done by the girls. Valerie, the mother, was washing clothes in a basin. She was a young woman, maybe in her early 30s, with the same dark hair as her daughters, tied back in a simple bun. She wore a faded t-shirt and loose pants, sleeves rolled up to reveal thin but strong arms. She dried her hands on the apron she wore and stood upright when she saw Miles. There was something in her eyes, a mixture of surprise, distrust, and unyielding dignity that impressed Miles immediately. "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" she asked, her voice firm, showing no sign of discomfort about a well-dressed stranger in her home. The girls ran over to her, talking all at once, trying to explain who Miles was. Valerie quieted them with a gentle gesture, then turned her attention to Miles. Miles introduced himself, describing how he'd met the girls, finding them on the sidewalk, buying them bread at the bakery, and how he'd come back today and been invited along. He made sure to keep the story simple and direct, careful not to frame it as charity or pity. "I apologize for just showing up," he concluded, feeling awkward. "Your daughters are pretty convincing." A slight smile touched Valerie's face, softening her features. "They have that effect on people," she replied. "Thank you for helping them yesterday. I didn't know they went out to sell, Henry." There was a mix of gratitude and shame in her voice that made Miles's throat tighten. "They're wonderful kids," he said sincerely. "It was a pleasure to help." Valerie invited him in. Miles had to duck under the low door frame. The space felt even smaller on the inside, but it had a sense of coziness and warmth his large, empty apartment had never provided. They sat on crates, covered by thin cushions. It was the kind of makeshift furniture Miles had never experienced, but it was surprisingly comfortable. He handed over the package of bread he'd brought, trying to make it seem casual, not like a handout. "I passed by the bakery today and thought the girls might like it," he explained. "Ms. Rosa seems to know them well." "Ms. Rosa is a good person," Valerie replied, accepting the package with a nod of thanks. "She sometimes saves us the bread from the previous day." She offered Miles a simple cup of tea, boiling water in a small kettle on the stove. The tea leaves were few and the flavor mild, but there was care in how Valerie served it, in chipped but clean mugs that touched Miles deeply. She spoke little, but each word carried a quiet dignity. There was no lament in her voice, no veiled plea for help, just an acknowledgement of a tough life, faced with courage. "The girl said you clean houses," Miles commented, trying to make conversation. "Yes," Valerie nodded. "I have 3 regular clients during the week. On the other days, I take odd jobs. I do laundry for people, too." "That must be exhausting," Miles observed, immediately feeling silly for stating the obvious. "It's honest work," she said, no bitterness in her voice. "And it lets me be with my girls at night. That's what matters." The girls played on the floor with Henry and some small rag dolls, likely sewn by Valerie herself. They giggled and whispered, weaving imaginary stories in which the teddy bear was always the brave protector. Miles watched them, fascinated. How could they be so cheerful, so imaginative, despite having so little? The contrast to his own life, full of material possessions but empty of genuine laughter, was stark. Valerie, with dark circles under her eyes, was nonetheless resolute. There was a strength in her that went beyond the physical, like she carried the weight of the world, but refused to be bent by it. Miles realized he was in the presence of an extraordinary woman, the kind he rarely encountered in his world of business and luxury. The conversation slowly found a natural flow. Valerie told him she'd been widowed 3 years earlier. Her husband had died in a construction accident. Since then, she'd been raising the girls alone, without any family support since they lived in another town. "But we get by," she concluded, with a small but genuine smile. "The girls are strong like their father." Miles left with deep respect for that woman. As he said goodbye, promising to visit again, he felt that something fundamental had changed within him. The image of Valerie washing clothes with hands cracked from hard work, yet maintaining her dignity. The girls creating worlds of imagination with bottle caps and strings. The tiny room that was cramped but clean, filled with love and resilience. All of it stayed with him. Stepping outside, he glanced at the sky, which was beginning to darken. The same moon would rise over them that night, over him in his luxurious apartment, and over Valerie and her daughters in that little room at the back of an old building. But something told him that, with all their simplicity, they appreciated its beauty far more than he ever had. The next day, Miles returned with groceries. Not just bread and fruit, but a variety of items he thought they might need. Rice, beans, pasta, oil, salt, sugar, powdered milk, some vegetables, and even a small package of cookies he guessed the girls would enjoy. He personally chose everything at the supermarket, a task he hadn't done in years, since his housekeeper usually took care of it. Arriving at the little back room, he knocked on the door with some hesitation. What if Valerie saw it as charity? What if she felt offended? Before he could worry too much, the door opened and Nora's face appeared, lighting up when she saw him. "Miles!" she shouted, running to hug his legs, already forgetting her initial shyness. "June, Miles is back!" June appeared behind her, more reserved but just as pleased. Her eyes widened at the sight of the bags he carried. "What's all that?" she asked, curious. "Some things for you," Miles answered, trying to sound casual. "I thought you might need them." Valerie appeared in the doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. Her eyes showed surprise, then a complex mix of gratitude and embarrassment. Miles realized he'd have to tread carefully to avoid wounding her pride. "Good morning," she said with a small smile. "Come in, please." The girls helped him carry the bags inside, turning the task into a sort of game. June lined up the items by size, while Nora insisted on naming each product as if they were newly discovered treasures. "Look, rice. We can make that colored rice you do, Mom," Nora exclaimed, holding the package in both hands. "And there's beans, too," June added. More pragmatic. "Now we can have real rice and beans." Miles watched, torn between joy and sadness. How could something as basic as rice and beans bring them so much happiness? What kind of hardships had they been through? As they organized the groceries, Nora mentioned the leaks, showing Miles the strategically placed buckets around the room. She gestured dramatically, explaining how water dripped during storms. "That one over there is the worst," she said, pointing to a corner near the bed. "It makes noise all night long. Drip, drip, drip." "Mom tried to fix it with tape, but it didn't work," June added, serious. "But we don't mind too much," Nora went on, with the typical resilience of children. "We pretend it's magic rain." "Yeah, we imagine each drop has a wish inside," June explained, a bit shy about her imagination. "If we catch a drop in our hand, the wish comes true." "What do you wish for?" Miles asked, genuinely curious. The girls exchanged glances, as if deciding whether to share a secret. "June wishes for books," Nora finally revealed. "I wish for a real doll, one that can close its eyes." Miles felt a knot in his throat. Such simple wishes, which for many children would be ordinary, were almost impossible dreams for them. He looked at the damaged ceiling, the water stains, the peeling paint. This was no place for anyone to live, let alone two young children. Sensing his gaze, Valerie asked the girls to take some of the groceries to the stove. Then, in a quiet voice, she stepped closer to Miles. "Thank you," she said, clearly uncomfortable but standing tall. There was a dignity in her stance that Miles admired more each day. "This will help us a lot, but I don't want you to think—" "I don't think anything," Miles gently interrupted. "I just want to help." "No strings attached, no expectations," Valerie nodded, then took a deep breath as if to gather courage. "Things have been hard since Pedro, my husband, died," she began, looking toward the girls playing with Henry in the corner. At first we had some savings and his family helped a bit. But the money ran out, and so did their help. Miles listened quietly, recognizing the bravery it took to share such difficulties with someone almost a stranger. I try to work as much as possible, but with the girls... She hesitated. I can't leave them alone too long, they're too little, and daycare is expensive. She talked about the hardships, the nights without sleep, described her cleaning jobs, the laundry she did to supplement her income, the bills always behind, mentioned how the rent for this little room took up almost half her earnings, and how the landlord was threatening to increase it. Sometimes I think about going back to my hometown to be closer to my mom, she confessed, but there's no work there. At least here I can earn enough to feed them. While Valerie spoke, Miles took in every detail of the small space. Beyond the leaks, the walls had cracks, the plumbing was questionable, the cement floor was cold and inadequate. It wasn't just poverty that struck him, but the injustice of the situation. A hard-working mother, two bright and loving kids, stuck in these conditions. And school? He asked. Do the girls go? Not for now, Valerie answered. And for the first time, Miles saw a shadow of shame in her eyes. They were in public school, but we had to move neighborhoods when the rent at our old place got too high. I'm trying to enroll them in a school nearby. Miles listened, silent. Every word from Valerie, every story from the girls, every detail of that cramped, damp place came together in his mind, forming a clear picture of the injustice they faced. He looked at the girls now playing with some paper he'd brought along with the groceries. They were drawing with worn-colored pencils, creating vibrant worlds in which they lived in big houses with gardens. He saw hope in their eyes, the ability to dream, even in adversity. He looked at Valerie, with her dignified yet tired gaze. He realized he had to do more. Much more. Nora's words echoed in his mind. We pretend it's magic rain. A child who transformed leaky drips, symbols of hardship, into something magical. June, wishing for books, whispering her dreams to drops of water coming through a broken ceiling. This family deserved far more than just a few bags of food. Miles looked again at the little room. Beyond the obvious problems, he saw Valerie's efforts to make it a home. The improvised curtains, the small vase with wildflowers, the girls' drawings taped to the wall. It was a space of love, but it wasn't a suitable living space. I have to go, he said finally, glancing at his watch. I have a meeting in an hour. Thank you for everything, Valerie said, walking him to the door. Really? No need to thank me. Miles smiled, crouching to receive a hug from the girls. I'll be back soon. Promise? Nora asked, eyes sparkling with hope. I promise, he answered, with a certainty he hadn't felt since he was a kid. Miles left with the determination of someone who had just discovered a real purpose. The stories he'd heard among shopping bags touched something deep in his heart. Something he hadn't known was still alive. As he walked back to his car, an idea began to form in his mind. Miles told no one of his plan, not even his secretary, who was puzzled when he requested 2 afternoons off for personal matters. He spent hours searching for the perfect place, not too far from downtown so Valerie could still find work, in a neighborhood with decent schools, with enough space for 2 growing children. Most of all, a place where sunlight could enter without asking permission. He found the house on a quiet street lined with trees, with a small park at the end of the block. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, safe, and welcoming. The kind of place where happy stories could unfold. The owner was an elderly lady who wanted to rent only to a respectable family. Miles paid 6 months in advance and signed the contract in Valerie's name. A few days later, Miles showed up with a key. He arrived unannounced, finding the girls drawing on the sidewalk in front of the rundown complex. Henry the Teddy supervised their art, propped up against a piece of brick. Miles! Nora dropped the stick she was using as a pencil and ran toward him. Look what we're drawing! She proudly pointed to the ground, where a childlike sketch showed 4 figures holding hands, 2 small ones, 1 taller, and 1 that looked like a man in a suit. That's us, June explained shyly. Me, Nora, Mom, and you. Miles felt his heart clench. How had these kids become such a big part of his life so quickly? How had he gone so long without knowing them? It's beautiful, he said sincerely. You both have a lot of talent. Mum's inside, Nora said, grabbing his hand without hesitation. Come on. Miles let her guide him, the key feeling heavy in his pocket, a secret ready to be revealed. They found Valerie finishing up ironing some clothes with an old iron. Her dark circles looked deeper, but she smiled at the sight of him. Miles, what a nice surprise. Sorry for dropping by unannounced, he said. I want to show you something. Valerie gave him a puzzled look. Show me what? Miles pulled the key from his pocket. A simple key, not much different from any other, but for him it represented a doorway to a new world, not just for Valerie and the girls, but for himself. It's a surprise, he said with a smile. Can you come with me now? The girls started jumping up and down with excitement. Yes, 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 Nora shouted. A surprise. Please, Mom, June pleaded, tugging at Valerie's skirt. Valerie hesitated, glancing at the pile of clothes she still needed to iron. I'm not sure, Miles. I have to finish this. The client needs them early tomorrow. This surprise will make you smile, Mom, Nora said, with childlike wisdom. You smile so little. Something in Valerie's face softened at her daughter's words. She set the iron aside and sighed. All right, let's see this surprise. They took a bus. The girls, excited, sat together by the window, pointing at everything they saw outside. Valerie remained quiet, worried about the unfinished ironing, the time ticking by, the bills still unpaid. Miles watched them all, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and hope. They got off in a simple but neat residential neighborhood. They walked 2 blocks, the girls running ahead, Valerie and Miles following behind in comfortable silence. It's right here, Miles announced, stopping in front of a small house painted a light yellow with a low white fence and a squeaky gate. What's here? Valerie asked, confused. Miles didn't reply. He just opened the gate and invited them in. The front yard was small but green, with a few colorful wildflowers lining the edges. A young tree stood in one corner, promising future shade in the summer. With his heart pounding, Miles inserted the key in the front door lock. He turned it, hearing the satisfying click, and opened the door to a new beginning. He led the family into a small but airy house with 2 bedrooms and a backyard. The living room had light-colored walls and a large window that let in the sunshine, creating golden patterns on the wooden floor. The kitchen, though simple, had enough cabinets and a round table where 4 people could sit together and look each other in the eye. The girls, momentarily stunned by surprise, soon dashed through the house, exploring every corner, opening every door, their high-pitched voices echoing in the still empty rooms. Nora shouted, "The windows open so easily!" She pushed and pulled the bedroom window, marveling at its smooth operation, so different from the stuck windows in their old little room. A soft breeze drifted in, carrying the scent of flowers from the yard. June jumped onto the bed. We can sleep sideways without touching the wall. In the larger bedroom stood a simple but new double bed. June flopped onto it, spreading out her arms and legs, reveling in the luxury of being able to fully stretch out without hitting a wall or someone else. "Look, Mum," Nora called from the other bedroom. "There are 2 beds here. One for me and one for June." Valerie stood still in the living room, hands covering her mouth, eyes brimming with tears. She looked as if she feared making any movement that might wake her from a wonderful dream. "Miles, what is this?" she finally managed, her voice trembling. "It's your house," he answered simply. "If you want it, of course." "Our house?" Valerie looked around, incredulous. "But how? We can't afford a place like this." "The rent is reasonable," Miles explained, already having planned this part. "And I've arranged it so it fits your budget. This isn't charity, Valerie. It's an opportunity for you and for me, too." "For you?" "Yes," Miles smiled. "You have no idea how much you 3 have given me in the last few weeks. Much more than I could repay with a house." The girls raced back to the living room, their faces lit with pure joy. June, usually the more reserved, had sparkling eyes. Nora was nearly bouncing. "Mom, there's a backyard, and a tree we can climb. And there's a bedroom just for us. And a big closet." Valerie was crying silently, not with sadness or self-pity, but with relief and gratitude. a hope she had almost forgotten how to feel. Miles said, "You deserve more than just surviving." He spoke softly but with conviction. It wasn't just a pretty phrase, it was a truth he'd learned by watching this family. Their resilience, their dignity, their ability to find joy in even the hardest times. Valerie dried her tears and, for the first time since Miles had met her, smiled without reservation. It was a smile that transformed her tired face, revealing the young woman behind the worries and endless work. "We accept," she said, finally. "And we'll pay every penny. I promise." Miles nodded, respecting her pride. "I know you will." Sensing the decision was made, the girls began planning how to arrange their new room. Nora wanted to paint stars on the ceiling. June dreamed of a bookcase. The afternoon wore on, and the sun began to dip low in the sky. Its rays streamed through the windows, painting the house golden, creating that effect Miles had been hoping for, windows of sunshine, not just openings in the wall but portals through which light could pour in, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. As the girls ran around the yard and Valerie timidly explored the kitchen, Miles realized the house was not just a gift to the family, it was also a gift to himself, a reminder that there was more to life than business deals and profit margins. There were people, there was sunlight, there were windows waiting to be opened. Moving day came on a sunny Saturday. There wasn't much to bring. Some clothes, a few kitchen utensils, a box of improvised toys, and of course Henry the teddy, who now had a place of honor in the girls' room. Miles hired a small van for the move, and to Valerie's surprise, the house was already outfitted with the basics: beds, a table and chairs, a simple but comfortable couch, a small fridge, and a new stove. "I can't accept all this," Valerie protested when she saw the furniture. "Think of it as a loan," Miles replied with a calm smile. "Whenever you're able, you can buy your own and we'll return these." Valerie eventually agreed, not because she lacked pride, but because she saw the joy in her daughter's eyes and didn't want to take it away. June already imagined a corner of the room where she might place a bookshelf full of books. Nora tested the new bed by jumping on it to check its softness and height. The first week in the new house was all about adjustment. The girls roamed every corner, finding little treasures: a bird's nest in the backyard tree, a hidden shelf in a closet, the patterned sunlight made on the floor throughout the day. Valerie kept working her cleaning and laundry jobs, but Miles noticed she seemed less weary, as if the weight of the world had lifted a bit. On the following Sunday, Miles arrived with a surprise: school uniforms and complete school supplies for both girls. "The school is 4 blocks from here," he explained, as the girls admired their new notebooks, colored pens, and unsharpened pencils. "It's a public school, but it has a good reputation. I spoke with the principal, they can start tomorrow." "So soon?" Valerie looked both scared and relieved. "There's no reason to wait," Miles said gently. "They've missed too much time already." That night, after Miles left, Valerie sat on the bed between her daughters, explaining that the next day would be a big day, full of new things to learn and new friends to make. The girls listened with wide eyes, a mixture of fear and excitement etched on their small faces. "What if the other kids don't like us?" June asked, ever cautious. "Everyone will like you," Valerie reassured her, stroking her hair. "You're special." "What if we don't know the answers?" Nora worried, biting her lip. "Nobody knows everything, honey. You're going there to learn." When the girls finally fell asleep, Valerie lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her heart was tight with worries, but also overflowing with hope. School meant a future, opportunities her daughters wouldn't otherwise have. Morning arrived with a clear sky and gentle sun, as if the universe itself conspired to make the day perfect. Valerie woke before her alarm and found the girls already up, too excited to sleep in, uniforms ironed, new backpacks ready. The girls were prepared for their first day of school. The uniforms were simple: navy blue skirts, white blouses, knee-high socks. But on them, it might as well have been evening gowns, the way they admired themselves in the small bathroom mirror, spinning to see how their skirts moved, adjusting their blouses over and over. "You look beautiful, Nora," said June, with sincere admiration. "You too, June," Nora replied, helping her sister fix her hair. Valerie made a special breakfast, eggs and toast, a rare treat before, but now more feasible thanks to the new fridge and a functional kitchen. The girls ate quietly, a sign of nervousness. Even Henry, the teddy, seemed more solemn that morning, perched on a chair to join them. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:30, Miles punctual as ever. He'd offered to accompany them on their first day, something Valerie accepted gratefully. She wanted to go too, of course, but she had an important cleaning job across town that morning and couldn't afford to miss it. "Good morning," Miles greeted them as he entered with a smile. He held a small bouquet of daisies in his hand. "Are those for me?" Nora asked hopefully. "Actually," Miles said, handing the flowers to Valerie, "they're to celebrate your big day." Valerie accepted them with a shy smile, a slight blush creeping into her cheeks. For a moment, she looked younger, lighter, as if she were just a woman receiving flowers from a man, unburdened by her complicated reality. "I'll put them in water," she said, turning away so he wouldn't see the emotion in her eyes. Miles turned to the girls, admiring their uniforms. "You look like real students," he exclaimed. "Ready to take on the world?" "Yes," Nora replied, ever enthusiastic. "I think so," June said more cautiously, but with a sparkle of determination in her eyes. The walk to school was a mix of lively chatter and tense silences. The girls clutched their backpacks tightly, as if afraid someone might snatch them away. Other students converged in the same direction, some with parents, others old enough to walk alone. Miles accompanied them to the gate. Nora clung to his hand, gripping it every time a group of noisy children ran past. June repeatedly adjusted the bow in her hair, a nervous tick Miles had noticed before whenever she was anxious. "What if we can't make any friends?" Nora whispered as they stopped in front of the school. "You will," Miles promised, crouching to their level. "You know why? Because you're special. Because you're kind, smart, and you've got some awesome stories to tell." "What stories?" June asked, curious. "Henry's story, for one," Miles replied with a smile. "Or how you turn leaks into magical rain. Kids love stories like that." The girls smiled, a little more confident. The school bell rang, calling the students inside. "Go ahead," Miles urged them. "I'll be right here when you're done." "Promise?" Nora asked, her eyes suddenly filled with anxiety. "Promise," Miles said, with the seriousness he usually reserved for million-dollar contracts. The girls took a deep breath, joined hands, and walked into the school. Two small figures in pristine uniforms, backpacks on their shoulders, carefully groomed hair. They looked so fragile yet so brave, Miles thought. Across the street, Valerie stood at a distance. She was crying, trying to hide it. She had to head to work, but she couldn't resist stopping by the school just to see her daughters walk in for the first time. She didn't want them to see her, worried she'd make them more nervous or insecure. But she needed to witness that moment. Miles noticed her and waved discreetly. Valerie quickly wiped her tears and waved back. There was a silent understanding between them, an unspoken agreement to do their best for these two children who, without meaning to win, had changed their lives. Hours passed slowly for Miles. He tried working remotely from a nearby cafe but kept thinking about the girls. How were they doing? Had they made friends? Were the teachers kind? He was surprised by how worried he felt, as though June and Nora were somehow his responsibility, part of his life. At 12:30 sharp, Miles was back at the school gate. Other parents and guardians were gathering, waiting for dismissal. The bell rang, and soon the courtyard filled with uniformed kids running, laughing, calling out to their parents. For a moment, Miles worried he wouldn't be able to spot them in the crowd. Then he heard, "Miles, over here!" It was Nora, waving frantically, dragging June by the hand. They dashed over to him, faces glowing with excitement. "How was it?" Miles asked as they walked back home. Returning from school, Nora said, "The teacher said we're good at drawing." Her eyes shone with pride. For a child who'd spent so much time drawing with sticks in the dirt, having her art praised by a teacher was powerful validation. "She let us draw during recess," Nora went on, hopping with each step. "I made a house with a tree, just like ours now." "I drew Henry," June chimed in, more reserved but just as proud. "The teacher asked who he was, and I told her his story." Everyone wanted to hear, June added. We're going to learn how to write your name. There was a seriousness in her voice, as though writing Miles's name was a critical mission. The teacher showed us some letters today, she explained. She said soon we'll be writing full words. I want to write your name first. And I want to write Henry and new house, Nora added, already envisioning her future as a writer. When they got home, Valerie had already returned from work, waiting anxiously at the door, scanning their faces for any sign of sadness or disappointment. What she saw instead was joy and excitement. The girls ran to her, both talking at once about school, new friends, and a kind teacher who praised their drawings. She let us sit together, Nora exclaimed. Some twin kids have to sit apart, but we don't. They have a library in the school, June added, eyes shining, with real books that we can check out. Miles watched the scene, smiling. It felt as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, a weight he hadn't even realized he was carrying. The girls were okay. They were happy. They were where they belonged, in school, learning, growing. The girls showed off their notebooks. One had a drawing of a heart with 3 names, Valerie, Nora, and June. It was a simple drawing done with colored pencils, but it held profound meaning. This was their family, their center, their universe. The teacher asked us to draw our family, June explained, so we made this heart with our names on it. It's beautiful, Valerie said, voice thick with emotion. And we wanted to put your name on it too, Nora told Miles with a child's direct honesty. But we didn't know if we could. Miles felt a lump in his throat. It was the first time anyone had suggested he might be part of a family, part of a heart, drawn with love in a school notebook. You can put my name anywhere you want, he answered, his voice rougher than he intended. I'd be honored. Valerie looked at him with a complex expression, gratitude, confusion, and maybe a hint of fear. What was happening here? What was this strange family being formed without anyone having planned it? The girls went to put away their school stuff and change clothes, leaving Valerie and Miles alone in the small living room. Valerie, emotional, said, I want to work. I want them to be proud of me. There was a determination in her voice that Miles recognized, that inner strength that had kept her going all these years, raising 2 children alone under circumstances that would have broken many. I don't want to depend on anyone forever, she continued. I need to set an example for my girls. Show them we can find our place in the world. Miles nodded, understanding perfectly. It wasn't just about money or independence. It was about dignity, self-esteem, being able to look her daughters in the eye and say, look what Mom can do. Miles replied, we'll figure this out. It wasn't an empty promise. He'd already been thinking about it, actually. His company needed someone reliable at reception to handle scheduling, greet clients, keep things organized. Valerie had all the qualities required: responsibility, intelligence, dignity, and the schedule would fit around the girls' school hours. But that was a conversation for another day. Today was for celebrating the girls' first day of school, the start of an educational journey and new opportunities. They did great today, Miles said with a smile. You should have seen how they walked into class, brave as little lions. They've always been like that, Valerie replied proudly. Strong, even when things were hard. Just then, the girls came back in their home clothes, carrying Henry the teddy. He wants to know how school went, Nora said seriously. Then let's tell him, Miles answered, sitting on the couch and beckoning them to join. Every detail. And so they stayed there, the 4 of them and the teddy, talking about their big day, about letters and numbers, about praised drawings and potential new friends, about a future that, for the first time in a long while, seemed bright and full of possibilities. It all started with a phone call in the middle of the night. Miles woke with a start, the glow of his cell phone lighting the dark room. It was his business partner, sounding panicked. Turn on the TV, right now. Every channel was covering the same story, a financial scandal involving Miles's company, allegations of tax fraud, questionable contracts, bribery of inspectors. His name flashed across headlines alongside words like suspect, under investigation, possible fraud. Miles sat on the edge of his bed, stunned. None of it made sense. His company had always operated legally, He personally reviewed every contract, every tax document. How could this be? The answer emerged with daylight. Internal sabotage. His chief financial officer, a man he trusted, had doctored documents, embezzled funds, and orchestrated an elaborate scheme that was now blowing up in Miles's face. Worse, there was forged evidence implicating Miles in the scheme. The following weeks were a slow-motion nightmare. Clients cancelled contracts, investors pulled out. The board demanded his temporary resignation. Lawyers threw around phrases like reputational damage and possible criminal charges. Miles fought back. He hired investigators, gathered evidence of his innocence, gave interviews trying to clarify the situation, but the damage was done. His image was tarnished. Trust was gone. The scandal exploded like a bomb in the financial market. Stocks plummeted. Clients fled, partners severed ties. The company Miles had painstakingly built over the years, brick by brick, collapsed like a house of cards. Miles's company sank. It wasn't gradual. It was a collapse. The last of his supportive investors bailed when a second scandal emerged. The CFO had fled the country with millions in embezzled funds. Miles could eventually prove his innocence, but his assets were frozen, his accounts seized, and his reputation destroyed. He lost contracts, investors, everything. Years of hard work and carefully built relationships evaporated in days. The once bustling office was now deserted, filled with abandoned desks and dying plants. For 2 weeks, Miles barely left home. He took calls from lawyers, tried to grasp the extent of the disaster, searched for ways to salvage anything from the wreckage. Nights were the worst, lying in the dark, insomnia devouring him as his mind spun in endless loops of what if and how did I miss it? Another thought tormented him. Valerie and the girls. In the past months, they had become essential to his life. The rent for the house, the girls' school, the promised job for Valerie, all dependent on resources he no longer had. How could he face them? How could he look into those children's eyes and tell them they might have to leave the house with the sunny windows? In the 3rd week, Miles finally mustered the courage. He dressed simply, jeans and a shirt, nothing like the expensive suits he once wore, and drove to Valerie's home. At least he still had his car, though probably not for much longer. It was an autumn Sunday. Heavy grey clouds threatened an impending storm. Miles found it fitting, nature mirroring the turmoil inside him. Valerie opened the door, her smile fading as soon as she saw his expression. He looked like he'd aged years in a matter of weeks. His eyes were sunken with dark circles, lacking their former spark. His once confident posture had slumped, as if under an invisible burden. "Miles," she began, concern evident in her voice. "Is everything okay? Can we talk?" he asked, his voice hoarse from days of little use. Inside, the girls were playing in the living room. Seeing Miles, they ran to hug him like always, but something in his face stopped them. Even Nora, usually the most impulsive, paused halfway, watching him with worried, wide eyes. "Are you sick, Miles?" she asked timidly. "No, sweetheart," he replied, trying to smile but managing only a faint curve of his lips. "Just a bit tired." Valerie understood something serious was happening. With a soft voice, she asked the girls to go play in their room for a while. They obeyed, but not without throwing anxious glances at Miles, as if afraid he'd vanish while they were gone. He was back in Valerie's house, the one he had rented for them, now a painful reminder of what he was about to lose. But the place had changed. What was once just a bare structure was now a home. There were drawings on the walls, colorful cushions made by Valerie, small potted plants on the windowsills. It felt alive. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd shared so many meals and stories. Valerie placed a cup of tea in front of him, silently waiting. Outside, the rain was starting to fall, a steady rhythm on the windows. "I lost everything," he finally said, words heavy as stones. "My company, my investments, my reputation." He told her about the scandal, the betrayal, the rapid collapse of everything he'd built. He spoke without self-pity, just recounting facts in a monotone voice, still in shock. "I might not be able to help anymore," he concluded, staring at the untouched tea. "The rent is paid for 3 more months. After that, I don't know." "I'm sorry, Valerie. I'm so sorry." A long silence followed, broken only by the rain pounding against the windows. Miles couldn't bring himself to look at her, afraid of seeing disappointment or anger, or worse, pity. Valerie answered, "Now it's our turn." Miles lifted his eyes, confused. He'd braced himself for many reactions, but not this. Valerie looked serene, almost resolute. "What do you mean?" "You helped us when we needed it," she said firmly. "When my daughters were hungry, when we were living in that leaky little room, when we needed a fresh start, now it's our turn to help you." Miles felt an unfamiliar lump in his throat, one he couldn't swallow. "Valerie, I'm not talking about money," she interrupted gently. "I'm talking about support, about not being alone, about having someone who believes in you, even when everything seems lost." In that moment, something inside Miles shattered. Perhaps it was the last remains of the wall he'd built around his heart over the years. Perhaps it was the weight of the last few weeks finally finding an outlet. Or maybe it was simply Valerie's gaze, so full of understanding and strength. He didn't realize he was crying until he felt the hot tears rolling down his cheeks. He tried to hide them, embarrassed, but Valerie reached out and placed her hand over his, squeezing firmly. "It's okay," she said. "Sometimes we need to break before we can rebuild." Just then, the girls came back into the kitchen. Of course they had heard everything. In a small house, walls are thin, and children have sharp ears, especially when it involves adults they love. They said nothing as they approached Miles. This time, June, usually the more reserved, moved first. She took his free hand in both of hers. The girls embraced him. Not just any hug, a hug that spoke louder than words, a hug that enveloped not just his body, but his soul. Nora, impulsive as ever, practically leaped into his lap. June, more subdued but equally affectionate, hugged him around the neck. "It'll be okay, Miles," Nora said, with the absolute conviction only children possess. "We'll help you." "We know what it's like to start over," June added, with wisdom beyond her years. "It's hard, but not impossible." Miles felt something expand in his chest, a feeling he couldn't name. It was as if, in the midst of the storm that had destroyed his life, he'd found an unexpected refuge, a place where he didn't need to be strong all the time, where he could just be human, flaws and vulnerabilities included. June pulled away briefly and left the room. She returned moments later with a sheet of paper, which she shyly handed to Miles. June offered a drawing. "It's you, feeling sad, but we're with you." The drawing depicted a tall figure in a suit, tears streaming down his face. Around him, 3 smaller figures, obviously Valerie, Nora, and June, formed a protective circle. At the top of the page, in the clumsy handwriting of someone still learning was one word: family. Miles looked at the picture, then at the 3 people before him. They weren't just people he had helped, some charity project to ease his conscience. They were his family, the family he never realized he needed until now. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't deserve you." "Everyone deserves a family, Miles," Valerie said simply, "even if they make mistakes, even if they lose everything." In that moment, with the rain falling heavily outside, Miles realized that despite losing so much, he still had what was essential. He still had people who cared about him, not for what he could give, but for who he was. The following days were spent planning. Miles wasn't one to give up easily. With a clearer mind and lighter heart, he started considering options. His main account was frozen by the investigation, but he had some savings in a personal account. Not a fortune, but enough for a modest fresh start. Miles started over, not with the glamour and grandeur he was used to, but with humility and determination. He rented a small office in a second-tier commercial building, just 2 tiny rooms, basic furniture, and a refurbished computer. It was a stark contrast to the luxurious office he once occupied, complete with a panoramic view and Italian designer furniture. A small office, new ideas. Miles decided to focus on consulting for small businesses, a niche he'd previously ignored in favor of bigger, more profitable clients. Now he saw real value in helping newcomers, people with big dreams and small budgets. He would use his experience to guide them, helping them avoid the mistakes he had made. One afternoon, as he was setting up the new place, he picked up the phone and called Valerie. He invited Valerie. "I want you to be my secretary." There was a brief silence on the other end. "Miles, I've never worked in an office," she admitted hesitantly. "I'm not sure I have the skills for that." "You have exactly what I need, Valerie," he insisted. "Integrity, determination, the ability to do a lot with very little. You can learn the rest. Besides," he added with a smile in his voice, "the schedule will work around the girls' school." She agreed. Miles could hear the smile when she said, "I'll do my best." The following Saturday, they all went to organize the office. The girls were as excited as if they were heading to a party, carrying bags of treasures, a plant for the window, homemade pencil holders, even a framed drawing of Henry in business attire. Nora and June helped set everything up. While Miles and Valerie arranged files and set up the computer, the girls transformed the place. They taped their drawings to the walls, arranged the books by color on a small shelf, and placed wildflowers in a makeshift vase. "This is going to be the best office ever," Nora declared, satisfied with their work. "And can we come here after school?" June asked hopefully. "Of course you can," Miles answered, realizing he couldn't imagine his life without them anymore. By day's end, the tiny office looked completely different. It didn't have the luxury or sophistication of his old workplace, but it had something much more valuable: heart. Every corner reflected not just functionality but affection and hope, the touch of small hands doing their best. Before leaving, they all gathered in the center of the main room. They looked around at their collective effort, aware of how much more needed to be done, how many challenges lay ahead. Miles's reputation would need rebuilding, client by client. Finances were tight, the future uncertain, but there was also a sense of possibility in the air, that special energy that arises when people who care about each other join forces for a common goal. Nora, ever spontaneous, raised a tiny fist in the air like a little warrior and exclaimed, "Now we go for it." Miles smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He looked at Valerie, at June, at Nora, at the modest office that symbolized his new beginning, at the pictures on the walls that turned a commercial space into something personal, almost sacred. "Yes," he agreed, feeling a conviction that came not from reason but from his heart. "Now we go for it." Outside, the sky had cleared. The storm had passed, leaving the air fresh and clean. A faint rainbow arched across the receding clouds. Miles wasn't one to believe in signs, but in that moment, he allowed himself to hope that it meant something. That after every storm, calm follows. That new beginnings, though scary, can also be beautiful. And most importantly, that no one should have to face life's storms alone. The name came to him on a rainy afternoon. Miles was standing by the window of his small office, watching raindrops slide down the glass, while Valerie organized client folders. The girls, who'd come by after school, were drawing at their makeshift desk in the corner. "What do you think about giving the company a name?" Miles asked, turning to Valerie. "Something that represents this new start." Valerie looked up from her papers, thoughtful. "A name is important," she agreed. "It defines who you are and what you stand for." "Exactly. And I don't want anything that reminds me of the old firm. I want something fresh. Something that means roots," Nora shouted, holding up a drawing she'd just finished. "Like these." The drawing showed a tree with enormous roots, much bigger than the branches, bright red roots, drawn with bold strokes, spreading across the page in intricate patterns. "Why red?" Miles asked, curious. "Because red is strong," Nora explained matter-of-factly. "And roots have to be strong to hold the tree in a storm." Miles looked at Valerie, then at June, whose observant eyes missed nothing. Something clicked in his mind. "Red Roots," he said, testing the name. "Our new company will be called Red Roots." The business started small, almost invisible amid the vast sea of city enterprises. The first few months were tough. Miles called on any remaining contacts willing to trust him after the scandal. He landed some small clients, a bakery needing to organize its finances, a little sewing workshop looking to grow, a young programmer with a promising idea but no clue how to make it into a viable company. These were modest jobs, far from the million-dollar contracts Miles once pursued. But there was something new, real satisfaction in helping small entrepreneurs, in seeing the light in their eyes when they grasped a new concept, when their business advanced step by cautious step. Valerie learned quickly. Initially, she only answered phones and managed schedules. But soon she was studying at night, after the girls were asleep. Online courses in basic administration, accounting, customer service. More than once, Miles found her asleep at the kitchen table, head resting on open books and notes. "You don't have to do all this, Valerie," he told her one night, finding her poring over financial spreadsheets. "You already do so much." "I want to truly contribute," she said, determined. "I want to understand this world. I want to grow with the company." Miles admired her drive. It was the same spirit he'd recognized in her from day one, when she was washing clothes in a basin and maintaining her dignity despite her hardships. Valerie didn't accept limitations. She refused to settle for the minimum. And that, Miles realized, was exactly what Red Roots needed. Their first major client arrived 6 months in, a small coffee shop chain wanting to expand. The owner, a man named Thomas, had heard of Miles through a mutual acquaintance. He showed up suspicious. Stories of the scandal still circulated. But he left convinced, not just by Miles's expertise, but by the atmosphere of the place. "There's something different here," Thomas said while signing the contract. "It's not like the other consulting offices I visited. It feels more human." Miles smiled, glancing around. Indeed, the office didn't look like a typical corporate environment. The once white walls were now vibrant with color and framed drawings, pieces by the girls. Real plants grew in the windowsills, not artificial decor. Photos of clients were pinned on a corkboard, not as trophies, but as part of a growing community. The contract with the coffee chain was a turning point. Thomas spread the word about Red Roots among other entrepreneurs. The buzz started, bringing new clients and new challenges. Miles hired one assistant, then another. Soon, the small office felt cramped. Valerie became a pillar of the company, not just for administrative tasks, but as the guardian of its core culture. When new employees arrived, she was the one who explained the business philosophy. Red Roots isn't just a name. It's a promise to build strong foundations, grow sustainably, and withstand the storms together as a community. This different approach caught the attention of a business journalist who wrote an article about the company reborn from the ashes. Of course, the piece mentioned Miles's downfall, but it focused on the reinvention, on an enterprise approach that valued people as much as profits. The article generated a stir in the industry. Some mocked it as emotional and unrealistic. Others found it refreshing, a departure from the cold, calculated model dominating the market. Among the latter group was Clara Mendez, an investor known for backing innovative businesses. She showed up unannounced one rainy Friday at Red Roots' office. Miles was out at a meeting, so Valerie welcomed her. "I want to understand what you're doing here," Clara said, scanning the surroundings with analytical eyes. "What makes this place different?" Valerie didn't try to dazzle her with stats or charts. She offered Clara a cup of coffee and told her the whole story. The girls on the sidewalk selling a teddy bear, the house with sunny windows, the scandal, the rebirth. "We're a company that was born out of human connection," Valerie explained, "and that's what we offer our clients, not just technical expertise, but a genuine relationship." Clara spent the whole afternoon there. She talked with the team, studied client portfolios, observed the company's dynamics. When Miles finally returned late in the day, he found Clara in the corner with the girls, listening intently as June explained how she organized her colored pencils. The following Monday, Clara called with an investment proposal. It wasn't the biggest sum ever, but it was enough to finance the expansion they needed. A bigger office, better equipment, more staff. "I'm not just investing in a business," Clara explained. "I'm investing in an idea, in a different way of doing things." With Clara's backing, Red Roots took a leap. They moved to an entire floor in a well-located commercial building. They hired specialists in marketing, creative finance, and sustainable development. Their client list grew, now including mid-sized companies looking not just for profit but for purpose. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were crises, failed projects, unhappy clients. There were nights Miles stayed awake, worried about bills and decisions. There were times the old scandal resurfaced, wielded by competitors to undermine his credibility. In each difficult moment, however, Miles found he was no longer alone. Valerie was there with her quiet strength and unshakable faith. The team stood firm, committed to their shared vision, and the girls were there, able to turn even the darkest day into something light. The girls had their own dedicated space at the office. In the beginning, it was just a small table and chairs where they waited after school while Valerie finished work. Over time, that space grew and evolved. Now it occupied an entire room in the new office, with a colorful sign on the door reading, "Imagination Department." It was where employees went to take a break, get a fresh perspective on a problem, or simply enjoy a moment of joy on a stressful day. The room overflowed with drawings, toys, and laughter. The walls were plastered with art, not just the girls' work, but contributions from staff and even some clients. There was a huge board where people jotted crazy ideas, impossible dreams, or future projects. A box full of costumes and props was available for anyone who literally needed to think outside the box. Henry the Teddy occupied a place of honor in a small armchair, a constant reminder of how it all began. Beside him was a sign made by June that read, "Sometimes you have to sell your most precious treasure to find something even more valuable." This spirit spread throughout the company. Meetings began with a few minutes of personal sharing. Major decisions considered not only financial impact, but the people involved. Clients weren't taken to formal lunches at expensive restaurants, but invited to picnics in the park or dinner at a team member's home. One day, in a meeting with potential investors, Miles was questioned about this unconventional approach. "It's all very nice," one of them said skeptically. "But how does it translate into real results?" Miles could have responded with numbers and growth charts, all of which he had at hand. Instead, he invited the group on a guided tour of the office. He showed them the workflow, introduced them to the team, let them experience the energy and creativity in every corner. The tour ended in the Imagination Department, where Nora and June were leading a brainstorming session with some employees. Now older and more self-assured, the girls presented their ideas for a new social project, a mentorship program for underprivileged kids who dreamed of starting their own businesses. As the investors left, the most skeptical among them said with a surprised smile, "Now I understand what you mean by strong roots. It's not just financial stability, it's deeper human connections." The mentorship program was a success, not just as PR but as a source of fresh ideas and new talent for the company. Other initiatives emerged, a fund for small businesses in vulnerable communities, free financial literacy workshops, partnerships with public schools. Red Roots' reputation solidified. No longer the company that survived a scandal, it was now seen as a pioneer of a more human, sustainable business model. Miles was invited to give talks, to share his story, not as a tragedy but as a journey of transformation. In one such talk, a young entrepreneur asked, "What's your secret to success? How did you rebuild after losing so much?" Miles thought for a moment before answering, "The secret wasn't rebuilding what I had. It was realizing that, for all my apparent success before Ace, something was missing. It felt hollow. The real secret was understanding that business isn't separate from life. It's part of it. And like any part of life, it thrives best when there's love involved." One ordinary afternoon, Miles was in his office watching the bustle through the glass walls. He saw Valerie competently and kindly directing a diverse team. He saw employees sharing ideas, laughing, collaborating. He noticed the name Red Roots on the wall, with its simple, bold lettering. At that moment, he felt a profound certainty. What they had built was more than a business, it was a family. A family not bound by blood, but by daily choices to support one another, grow together and face storms side by side. And at the heart of that family, a corner full of drawings, toys, and children's laughter reminded everyone that imagination was as valuable as experience, that joy was as essential as capital. Miles smiled, recalling the long path since that day on the sidewalk. Who would have guessed that two little girls and an old teddy bear would completely redefine his notion of success? Who could imagine that his greatest achievement wouldn't be measured in dollars, but in moments of genuine connection? Nora burst into his office, interrupting his thoughts. "Miles, come see. We just had an amazing idea for that new client." He stood up, following her to the imagination department, where the most unlikely dreams found strong roots and sprouted, transforming not just businesses, but entire lives. The date went almost unnoticed. Miles was immersed in meetings, focused on a new major client, when Valerie knocked softly on his door. "Do you know what day it is?" she asked, wearing a mysterious smile. Miles frowned, trying to recall. It wasn't Valerie's birthday, nor the girls'. It wasn't a holiday or a project deadline. "Sorry, I have no idea," he finally admitted. "Exactly 1 year," Valerie replied, "since you showed up with a key and changed our lives." Miles blinked in surprise. A whole year since the day he'd brought them to the house with sunny windows. It felt like it had been only yesterday, yet also like it had always been part of his life, as if there was no before. "We wanted to mark the date," Valerie went on. "Just something simple, just us four. The girls have been planning it for weeks." "They haven't said a word," Miles replied, genuinely surprised. "Because it was a secret," Valerie explained, laughing. "June made us all swear not to tell. She wanted it to be a surprise." "Any chance you'll tell me what they've planned? A little celebration in the backyard tonight. Nothing fancy." "Nothing fancy." Miles smiled, knowing that even the simplest things became special when that family was involved, a family brought to him by chance. Afternoon at the office dragged on. Miles tried to focus on reports, calls, and decisions, but his mind kept drifting to that evening, thinking about what that anniversary meant. 1 year since that new start. 1 year since he dared to make a move bigger than he thought he could handle. 1 year that turned a house into a true home. He finally left work at dusk. He drove to the house, no longer just Valerie's house in his mind, but home, somehow his as well. In many ways it was, not legally, but in the deeper sense of belonging. Approaching the gate, he saw colored lights glowing in the backyard. Small string lights hung from the trees, creating a magical atmosphere. A handmade banner stretched between 2 branches read, "1 year of our new life." The girls spotted him first. They ran to the gate, as they always did, but this time with a hint of solemnity, as if they sensed the significance of the occasion. "You're here!" Nora exclaimed, hugging his legs. "We were afraid you'd forget." "How could I forget something so important?" Miles replied, kneeling to hug her properly. "June baked a cake," Nora announced, tugging on his hand. "Mom let us decorate everything ourselves." June was waiting in the backyard by a simple table covered in a colorful cloth. Her usually serious face was lit by a shy but authentic smile. "Do you like the surprise?" she asked as Miles approached. "I love it," he answered sincerely. "It's perfect." 1 year later, a simple backyard party. No rented venues, no fancy catering, no professional decorators. Just a space that felt like home, adorned by small hands and big hearts. A chocolate cake, balloons, posters made by the girls. The cake wasn't perfectly round. The balloons hung at uneven heights. The posters had wobbly letters and abstract sketches. But for Miles, it was the most beautiful celebration he'd ever attended. They all sat at the table. Valerie had prepared a simple but tasty meal. The girls told stories, talking over each other, laughing at their own jokes, creating that aura of carefree joy only children can produce so naturally. "Remember the day we first met?" Nora asked between mouthfuls of cake. "We were selling Henry. And you bought us food," June recalled. "We thought we'd never see you again. But then you came back," Nora said, eyes gleaming. "You always come back." A brief silence fell, heavy with meaning. Valerie looked at Miles, a gaze conveying more than words could. After dinner, the colored lights in the yard looked even more magical against the night sky. The stars shone above them, silent witnesses to a celebration that, in all its simplicity, contained entire worlds of significance. Valerie brought out a small bottle of wine and 4 glasses, 2 standard ones for the adults, 2 filled with juice for the girls. She carefully poured a bit for each of them. Valerie toasted, "You didn't just help us, you stayed." Her voice carried all the weight of that critical distinction. Many people had helped over the years, with money, with a job, with temporary favors, but help can be fleeting, done in passing. Staying was different. Staying meant commitment, being present even when it was hard, even when there was no immediate reward. Miles felt his chest tighten at the profound simplicity of her words. He thought of everything they had gone through in that year, the early weeks in the new house, the start of school, the collapse of his company, the new beginning with Red Roots, the joys and the trials. Miles replied, "And you taught me how to live." It was no exaggeration or figure of speech. Before meeting Valerie and the girls, Miles had existed but not truly lived. He followed a routine, accumulated wealth and success, but something fundamental was missing, that spark that makes life meaningful. The girls had shown him how to find magic in small things. A leak turned into a shower of wishes, an old teddy bear transformed into a guardian of dreams, drawings in the dirt more precious than expensive art in fancy galleries. Valerie had taught him about dignity, quiet strength, the beauty of starting over even when all seemed lost. Together, they revealed to him the meaning of family, not an abstract concept or a social obligation, but a daily choice to love, support, forgive, and grow together. After the toast, the girls exchanged conspiratorial glances. June signaled with her head, and Nora ran inside and returning moments later with a wrapped parcel. "We made you a present," she announced, handing it to Miles. "You didn't have to," he began, but June cut him off. "We wanted to. Please open it." Miles carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a hardcover notebook, but not just any store-bought one. It was handmade. The girls presented a notebook decorated with collages. The cover was covered in small colored bits of magazines, photos, drawings, forming a mosaic that told the story of their year together in an abstract way. There was a photo of the house, clippings of words like family, dream, together, and little sketches of trees with red roots. Miles opened it, flipping through slowly. The first pages contained the girls' drawings of the house, the Red Roots office, and the 4 of them together in different scenes. There were written messages in their unsteady handwriting, short fairy tales they'd invented, little notes about daily life, but most of the pages were blank, waiting to be filled. On the last page, in June's careful handwriting, it read, "This is for continuing our story." Miles fought back tears. This wasn't just a present. It was a declaration of love, a promise of the future, an invitation to keep writing the next chapters of a story that had only just begun. It was recognition that, no matter how hard the past had been or how uncertain the future might look, the present moment held all the riches one could wish for: people to love, a purpose to follow, a place to call home. "Thank you," he finally said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Do you really like it?" Nora asked anxiously. "It's the best gift I've ever received," Miles replied, utterly sincere. The stars shone above them, the colored lights danced among the tree branches, and in the center of that humble backyard, 4 people, brought together by an old teddy bear, celebrated not just 1 year of a new beginning, but the ongoing discovery of what it really means to be alive. Years went by, but some things never changed. Red Roots grew, expanded into new markets, became known for its people-focused consulting model. The small office turned into an entire building with dozens of employees and projects throughout the city. The house with sunny windows got a fresh coat of paint, a blooming garden, a porch where everyone gathered on summer nights. The girls grew too. Nora, ever impulsive and full of ideas, got involved in the company's social projects even as a teenager, building bridges between Red Roots and local public schools. June, more analytical and observant, developed a special talent for numbers, helping Miles design financial models that balanced profit with social impact. Valerie was no longer just the secretary. She became the director of operations, ensuring the company's original philosophy stayed alive even through expansion. She studied, graduated, grew professionally, never losing the dignity and quiet strength that defined her. And Miles. Miles became the kind of entrepreneur he never imagined he'd be. Someone who measured success not just in profit and loss, but in the bright eyes of employees, in the company's positive impact on the community, in the culture of mutual support they had built together. There were challenges, of course, economic crises, aggressive competitors, moments of doubt, nights when Miles questioned whether he was doing the right thing, whether it might be simpler to revert to the older, familiar ways of business. In those moments, he only needed to look around at Valerie, the girls, and the team, and his conviction returned. One autumn morning, Miles arrived at the office earlier than usual. He enjoyed that quiet time before the official workday began, time to think, plan, and appreciate how far they had come. He sat at his desk, no longer a cheap piece in a cramped office, but a more elegant one in a spacious room overlooking the city. On Miles's desk sat the teddy bear with the red bow, Henry, in a place of honor on a special stand. The once faded fabric had been carefully restored. The button eye that used to dangle was sewn firmly back in place, and the red bow had been replaced by a new one of the same color. But it was still the same Henry. The teddy two little girls had been ready to sell for food on a sidewalk years ago. Someone knocked on the door. It was Nora, now a young woman but with the same radiant smile. "Planning meeting in 15 minutes, she reminded him. "June's already prepping the reports." "I'll be there," Miles replied, smiling. Nora entered, stepping closer to his desk and adjusting Henry's bow with an instinctive, caring touch. Nora said, "He's our good luck charm." Her voice was no longer that of a little girl, but it still carried that unwavering certainty she'd always had, an unbreakable faith that some people manage to keep, even when they grow up in a cynical world. June appeared at the doorway, holding a folder of documents. She was more serious than her sister, as always, but her eyes shone with the confidence of someone who knows exactly who she is and what she has to offer the world. June added, "And he reminds us of the beginning." There was a deep wisdom in that simple statement. In a world obsessed with newness, the next big thing, the next achievement, there's great value in remembering where you started, your roots, what truly matters. "You two go ahead," Miles said. "I just need a moment." Once alone, Miles looked at the teddy bear, the small object that had altered the course of his life. Who would have thought something so simple and worn could hold such importance? Who could have guessed that stopping on that sidewalk, on that ordinary day, would change not just the lives of two hungry girls, but his own existence? Through the glass walls, he could see Valerie in the hallway, discussing something with a few team members, gesturing with the vibrant energy she'd always had. He saw June in the meeting room, methodical and precise, preparing documents. Nora, in another corner, explained something to a group of interns, her enthusiasm clearly contagious. Miles glanced again at the teddy, at Valerie, at the girls, at this enterprise built on more than sand, on the solid foundation of genuine relationships, at this family fate had brought into his life in the most unexpected way. And he knew this was his place. Here, he had been saved by the love he had chosen to embrace, a love that began as compassion for two needy children, but became something far deeper. The understanding that we are all interconnected, all in need of connection, all capable of saving each other from life's storms. Miles stood, straightened his tie, and headed to the meeting where important decisions would be made. But the most important decision of his life had been made long ago, back on that sidewalk, when he chose to stop, when he chose to see, when he chose to stay. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.